Breaking news site, the New York Times, reporting congressional Democrats have now subpoenaed Deutsche Bank. I am joined by phone with one of the reporters who broke this very story, David Enrich of the New York Times. Maya Wiley, a former prosecutor in the Southern District of New York, also with me. David, your story has all of the big items in it. Financial records, Trump-related Russian dealings, and I see a reference to investigating money laundering. What did you find?
Well, we've known for a while that two of the most important committees on Capitol Hill, the House Financial Services Committee and the House Intelligence Committee, are conducting a joint investigation into Deutsche Bank's long, very unusual relationship with Donald Trump. And tonight, for the first time, we've learned that the subpoenas have actually started being issued, which means that Deutsche Bank is very soon, I think, going to be handing over reams of materials to some very experienced investigators and former federal prosecutors who are working on this case on Capitol Hill. So this is a big development.
Let's dig into that point you made, that you say it's a big development because of the nature of the information going back to Congress. Viewers are familiar with times where the word subpoena is used, and then it sets off a long fight with, for example, people who follow orders from President Trump. The point you seem to be digging into there, and that the article makes, is that Deutsche Bank appears to be working on an action plan so that they would actually fork these records over. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Deutsche Bank has spent the past several weeks, if not months, cooperating with investigators from Capitol Hill, helping them, in fact, frame the language on these subpoenas so that it's narrowly crafted enough that the bank believes it can easily comply with these. So I think that the materials will be handed over in fairly short order.
Did your reporting suggest that Donald Trump would have any way to stop that?
You know, that is something that committee staff have looked at, and I would say are a little anxious about. In fact, Deutsche Bank is going to need to notify the White House and the Trump Organization that it intends to hand over pretty detailed information about the president and his family company. And Trump does have the right to potentially go to court to try and block the bank from handing that over. You know, I don't think anyone knows right now whether that is actually going to happen, and if it did happen, how successful it would be.
It's a very interesting scoop. Stay with me. Maya Wiley, I want to zero in on one legal part. David is leading the charge for us on what he found, that this is happening. On the way an investigation would work, I want to read to you from his reporting here, along with Emily Flitter at the Times. Quote, the subpoenas seek records related to the business the banks did with suspected money launderers from Russia and other Eastern European countries. How does Congress approach something like that?
Well, I think directly, which is what we're sort of hearing in this reporting. If you know you have the potential for money laundering that impacts a president, and remember, we're talking about a president who not only would not disclose his tax returns, which was highly unusual, but has also not created a blind trust for all his business dealings. So he has the ability to see into all of his financial transactions if he wants to. Congress is doing something that's very much directly in its authority, it seems to me, to say that it wants to look at these transactions particularly, and as we were talking about earlier, where there are issues related to counterintelligence, right, and the possibility that you could have a president of the United States that might be in trouble.
Right. David, before I let you go, final question here. You name check in your reporting Citigroup, J.P. Morgan Chase, and Bank of America. What's that about?
Well, a number of these banks have, like Deutsche Bank, been involved over the years in moving money for very wealthy Russians, whether it's oligarchs or people connected to the Kremlin. And some of them acknowledged as much on Capitol Hill last week when they were being grilled by Maxine Waters. And I think this is, with the banks other than Deutsche Bank, and it's a fairly standard investigative move to see what they have and what they can come up with. With Deutsche Bank, it's much more targeted. They know exactly what they're after, and they intend to get it.
Fascinating. Congrats to you and Emily on a big story here, and thanks for jumping on the phone with The Beat.
My pleasure.
And my thanks to Maya Wiley for playing with us on several topics tonight. Appreciate your expertise. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.